He swore he would love her from a distance forever, until the child turned around and looked at him with his exact eyes. Are you listening from the car, your bed, or somewhere quiet you escaped to just for this story? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more intense, slow-burn Mafia romance stories. The night she left, he stood at the edge of the private airstrip and watched the taillights of her car disappear into the dark like a closing wound. He didn't follow. That was the promise. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of jet fuel and cold steel, but he barely felt it. His hands were clenched at his sides, knuckles white beneath the cuffs of his coat, jaw locked so tight it ached. Behind him, men waited. Soldiers, advisors, shadows in tailored suits, ready to move at a single word. One command and the car would have been stopped. One call, and she would have been escorted back, protected, enclosed within the walls of his world. He didn't give the order. Because he had looked into her eyes when she said his name that final time. Not angry, not accusing, just tired. Brave in the way people are when they've already decided to walk into pain on their own terms. "If I stay," she'd said quietly, "I will never really be free. And if I leave, you won't come after me." It hadn't been a question. He had nodded once. That was all he trusted himself to do. If he'd spoken, he would have broken. If he'd reached for her, he would have dragged her into a world that chewed people whole and called it loyalty. So he let her walk away. And after that night, he kept his word with ruthless discipline. He erased her name from reports, burned photographs, gave orders that her face, her past addresses, her known associates were off limits. No background checks, no quiet surveillance, no men stationed at corners she passed unknowingly. She was not to be followed, not to be protected, not to be touched by his shadow. "She chose a life without you," his right hand had said once carefully. "You don't have to make it harder." He had almost laughed at that. Almost. Because keeping the promise didn't make anything easier. It hollowed him out. There were nights he woke reaching for a body that wasn't there, the ghost of her warmth lingering just long enough to hurt. Days when the city blurred past the tinted windows of his car, and every dark-haired woman on the sidewalk made something twist painfully in his chest before logic intervened. He threw himself into work with a violence his men recognized as grief. Deals closed faster. Rivals fell harder. Blood was spilled with colder efficiency. No one dared ask why. He never said her name out loud again. Not even alone. He told himself she was safer without him. Told himself this was what love looked like when you were born into a world that poisoned everything it touched. Love meant distance. Love meant restraint. Love meant letting go even when every instinct screamed to hunt, to pull, to claim. Years passed. The empire grew. Enemies rose and fell. New threats replaced old ones. His life filled with noise and power and obligation, but never with her. That absence became a fixed point inside him, a quiet ache he carried like an old wound that had healed wrong. Sometimes he wondered where she was, if she had found peace, if she had loved again. He never checked. That was the promise, until the day fate broke it for him. It happened on a street that meant nothing to him, a city he rarely visited now. He was stepping out of a building, already mid-conversation with a man at his side, when someone cut through the world with surgical precision. A laugh, high, clear, unguarded. He turned without understanding why. The child was standing on the sidewalk, holding a woman's hand. Small, maybe 5. Dark hair falling into eyes too serious for someone so young. The boy twisted, impatient, and looked up, and in that single, devastating movement, the world tilted. Those eyes. There was no mistaking them. The exact shade, the sharp focus. The way the brow furrowed, familiar and defiant, as if even at that age the world was something to be challenged. For a fraction of a second, the boy's gaze brushed past him, and his breath stopped. The promise cracked, not because he wanted it to, not because he chose it to, but because the universe had decided distance was no longer enough. He had let her go, but no one had ever asked him to let go of a truth written in blood. She built her life the way people do when they're trying not to be found, carefully, quietly, and with no room for mistakes. No unnecessary patterns, no lingering in one place too long. No conversations that invited questions she wasn't prepared to answer. She chose a city small enough to disappear into, but large enough to offer anonymity. A job that paid the bills without drawing attention. An apartment with thin walls and a view of nothing special, because spectacular things were easier to track. Safety lived in ordinary. Every morning she woke before the alarm, even when she didn't need to. Old habits died hard. She would lie still for a moment, listening for sounds that didn't belong. The hum of cars outside, footsteps in the hallway, the neighbor's radio bleeding through the wall. Only when she was certain the world was still as it should be did she move. Her son slept curled on his side in the next room, one arm flung over his stuffed bear, hair falling into his eyes in that familiar way that made her chest tighten every single time. Some mornings she stood in the doorway longer than necessary, watching him breathe, memorizing the rise and fall of his small chest as if it were something that could be taken from her at any moment. Because she knew how quickly life could change when powerful men decided they wanted something. She dressed him for school in the mornings, packed lunches that always came back half-eaten, tied his shoes while he bounced, and talked about things that didn't matter, but felt monumental in his world. Dinosaurs, planets. Why the moon followed the car at night. She answered each question with care, her voice steady even when her mind wandered to places she never let herself name. She never spoke his father's name, not to her son, not to friends, not even silently, in the privacy of her own thoughts. Names had power. Names opened doors that were better left sealed. When the child asked, once, only once, why other kids had fathers at school events and he didn't, her heart had fractured so cleanly she almost admired it. Sometimes, she'd said carefully, crouching to meet his eyes, people love each other very much but can't stay together because it wouldn't be safe. He'd frowned, absorbing the idea with the solemn seriousness only children possessed. Safe like crossing the street? She'd smiled then. Real, bright. The kind of smile she practiced for his sake. Yes, exactly like that. He accepted it. Children often did, when given truths shaped gently enough not to cut. At night, when he slept, she allowed herself the dangerous luxury of remembering. The weight of a man who had once watched her like the world might steal her if he blinked. A voice low and deliberate, promising protection, with the certainty of someone who always delivered. Hands that knew how to command and how to hold, and the terrifying realization that love did not soften men like him, it sharpened them. Leaving him had nearly killed her. Staying would have finished the job. She had made her choice the day she realized there was something growing inside her that he could never know about. Not without consequences that could ripple outward and destroy everything in their path. She remembered sitting on the edge of the bathtub with the test in her hand, lungs burning because she'd forgotten how to breathe. Fear had come first. Love came right after. She never told him, because if he knew, there would be no distance. No promise strong enough to hold him back. He would protect. He would claim. He would drag the child into a world where bloodlines were leverage and innocence was a liability. She refused to give fate that opening. So she disappeared, changed numbers, took money she'd saved quietly, carefully, without ever letting him notice. She carried the weight alone. Morning sickness, fear, delivery in a hospital where no one knew her name or history. She signed the papers herself, held her son to her chest with shaking hands, and whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. I'll keep you safe. I won't let them find you. I won't let love become a weapon. Years passed. The fear never fully left. It simply learned how to live alongside laughter and school projects and late-night fevers soothed with whispered stories. She learned how to be strong in small, consistent ways. Learned that love could be quiet and still be powerful. Sometimes she caught her breath when her son frowned exactly the way his father did. When he stood too straight for a child his age. When strangers commented on his eyes. She always laughed it off. Inside, she prayed, because silence was the only shield she had left. And she believed, with the kind of faith born of terror and devotion, that as long as she kept the truth buried, the man she loved enough to leave would never come looking. She didn't know the truth had already found him. She sensed him before she saw him. It was the way the air changed, subtle, almost imperceptible, like the pressure drop before a storm. The sidewalk was crowded, the late afternoon noise a blur of passing conversations and traffic, but something tightened low in her chest all the same. Her hand closed reflexively around her son's, fingers curling too tight. He complained, of course. "Mama," he protested, tugging back with the impatience of a child who had places to be and thoughts too important to slow down for. She loosened her grip instantly, forcing a smile she'd perfected over the years. "Sorry, Cuore," she murmured. "Just stay close." She lifted her gaze, and there he was, across the street, stepping out of a black car that looked like it belonged in another world entirely. Sleek, polished, out of place in a way that made everything around it seem suddenly smaller, less real. Men moved around him with quiet precision, not crowding, not obvious, but unmistakably alert. He hadn't changed. The years had sharpened him. That was all. His hair was cut shorter now, his jaw harder. The lines around his eyes etched deeper by decisions that carried weight and consequence. He wore a dark coat over a tailored suit, posture relaxed but coiled, like an animal that didn't need to hurry because it had never known fear. Her breath caught painfully in her throat. She should have looked away, should have pulled her son in the opposite direction and vanished back into the safety of anonymity she'd spent years building. But shock pinned her in place, feet rooted to the pavement, heart hammering so loudly she was certain someone would hear it. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. She'd chosen this city because it was far from him. Far from anything that touched his world. She'd checked. Twice. She had done everything right. And still, fate had found her. He was laughing at something one of the men beside him said. The sound was low, brief, and dangerous in how familiar it felt. It slid under her skin like a blade wrapped in velvet, slicing open memories she'd buried deep enough to survive. Her son tugged her hand again. "Mama, can we get the round bread?" He pointed eagerly toward a bakery window, nose already pressed to the glass in his imagination. "Yes," she said quickly, too quickly. "In a minute." She turned slightly, angling her body without thinking. An instinctive, protective move born of years spent guarding secrets. She positioned herself so he was on the far side of her, her shoulder blocking the line of sight between them and the street. Her heart raced. "Don't look! Don't look! Please, don't look!" If he saw the child, really saw him, everything would shatter. Promises. Distance. The fragile illusion of control she'd wrapped around their lives. She watched him instead, unable to stop herself. Watched the way his gaze scanned the street, alert without appearing to be. Watched as his expression shifted, attention caught by something she couldn't see. For one horrifying second she thought he was about to turn his head. She held her breath. A horn blared somewhere behind her. A passerby bumped her shoulder, muttering an apology without waiting for a response. The moment fractured. He turned away. Her knees nearly gave out with relief. Her son leaned close, whispering conspiratorially, "Mama, why are you shaking?" "I'm not," she lied softly, crouching to his level, brushing his hair back with trembling fingers. just tired. His eyes, too perceptive, too much like someone else's, searched her face. Then he nodded, satisfied, already distracted by the promise of pastries and sugar. She stood, heart still pounding, and risked one last glance. He was stepping toward the building now, flanked by his men, already half-turned away from the street. The black car idled like a patient predator behind him. She guided her son in the opposite direction, each step measured, controlled, even as panic surged through her veins. She didn't run. She didn't hurry. Running drew attention. Running confirmed fear. But inside, everything screamed. That night, she barely slept. She replayed the moment again and again, every detail burned into her mind. The angle of his shoulders, the sound of his voice, the terrifying proximity of it all. She told herself it meant nothing, that powerful men moved through many cities, brushed past countless lives without ever noticing. That fate was not sentient, not cruel enough to design such collisions on purpose. But somewhere deep inside, a truth she'd tried to suffocate for years began to stir. She had seen him before he'd seen the child. Next time, she might not be so lucky. And fate, she was beginning to understand, never asked permission twice. He felt it before logic could catch up. The shift, the wrongness, the moment when instinct leaned forward and took the wheel. He had just finished speaking to one of his men, half his attention already moving to the next decision, when something tugged sharply behind his eyes. The street noise dulled, the city blurring into meaningless motion. His gaze lifted without conscious command, tracking movement across the sidewalk. And then he saw the child. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no cinematic pause, just a boy tugging on a woman's hand, mid-sentence, his mouth forming words he couldn't hear. But the boy turned, just slightly, just enough, and the world slammed to a stop. Those eyes. Not similar, not reminiscent, exact. The same dark, penetrating focus that had stared back at him from mirrors and reflections since childhood. The same shape, the same sharp awareness behind them, as if the boy were already assessing the world instead of merely existing in it. His chest tightened violently. That doesn't mean anything, his mind tried to argue. Genetics repeat. Faces echo. You're seeing ghosts. But then the child shifted his weight. The stance did it. Feet planted too evenly. Spine straight without instruction. That unconscious posture of someone who didn't slouch, didn't curl inward, didn't shrink. A posture learned or inherited from men who never expected the world to be gentle. From him. His breath stalled. Not caught. Stolen. The woman beside the boy adjusted her position subtly, placing herself between them. A protective movement so instinctive, so practiced, it cut deeper than any confirmation could have. He knew that movement. He had seen it once before. Years ago. In another life. In another version of her. Her. The recognition hit with brutal clarity. She hadn't changed as much as he'd expected. The softness in her hair, pulled back now instead of loose. The tension in her shoulders she tried to hide. The careful way she stood, angled slightly, always measuring exits, always guarding what mattered. She hadn't seen him yet. That much was clear. Her focus was on the boy, her face soft in a way he had almost forgotten existed. Not the guarded strength she wore when facing him in the past, but something gentler. Fiercer in a different way. A mother! The word detonated silently in his chest. No! His jaw tightened, teeth grinding as instinct roared. Count the years, do the math, don't leap. But his body already knew. The promise, the one he had treated like scripture, creaked under the weight of impossible truth. I said, don't follow her, he had told his men all those years ago. Don't watch, don't protect, don't interfere. And they hadn't. Which meant this, whatever this was, had grown entirely beyond his reach, beyond his knowledge. A life built without him. His fingers twitched at his side, the faintest betrayal of control. One step forward and everything would unravel. Her silence, his restraint. The careful distance he'd carved into himself like penance. The boy laughed suddenly, high and unguarded, and something inside him split cleanly open. Not fear, not anger, recognition. The child looked up at her then, brows drawing together in a familiar expression of stubborn curiosity, lips parting as if to argue a point far too big for his small body. The expression was his. There was no denying it now. He looked away sharply, pulse hammering, forcing himself to breathe as muscle memory demanded discipline where instinct screamed ownership. His men shifted around him, alert to the sudden change in his posture, but silent. They had learned long ago not to question moments like this. She finally looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and the impact was visible. He watched the color drain from her face, watched shock tighten her features, watched fear flash bright and immediate. But beneath it, something else. Resignation. Like a door she had known would one day be found had finally been kicked in. Her hand tightened around the boy's. He didn't move, didn't call out, didn't cross the street. Because he understood something then that no threat or enemy had ever taught him so clearly. This wasn't a confrontation to be forced. This was a truth that could only be survived if handled with care. But the promise, that fragile, hard-won restraint, had already cracked. Because whatever else the child was, he was his, and he had never been very good at letting go of what belonged to him. He waited, not because he was unsure, but because he understood pressure better than anyone. Under pressure, things either shattered or revealed their true shape. He wanted the truth intact. She felt him before she heard him. The awareness crawled up her spine as she buckled her son into his car seat, fingers fumbling with the strap she'd fastened thousands of times before. Her heart was beating too fast, too loud. She straightened, closed the door with controlled gentleness, and turned. He stood several feet away, alone. No men flanking him, no weapons visible. A deliberate choice. That frightened her more than force ever could. "Hello," he said quietly. The sound of his voice, unchanged, unsoftened, hit her harder than the sight of him had. It carried the same restraint she remembered, the same careful precision, as if every word was weighed before release. She swallowed. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." Not defensive, not angry, just truth. She folded her arms around herself, a useless gesture, but necessary. "Then leave." He didn't move. "I saw you," he said instead. "You saw me too. This isn't coincidence, and pretending otherwise would insult us both." Her nails bit into her sleeves. "You promised." "I did." "You said you'd let me go." "I did that too." Their eyes locked. Years collapsed between heartbeats. "And yet," he continued calmly, "there's a child in the back seat, with my eyes." The world tilted. She opened her mouth, closed it. No sound came out. There were lies prepared. She'd rehearsed them for years, shaped them until they almost felt real. But none survived the way he was looking at her now. Not accusing. Waiting. "I'm not here to take him," he said, as if sensing her fear spike. "I'm not here to drag you anywhere. I didn't bring men. I didn't bring threats." "Then why are you here?" she whispered. "Because I deserve an answer." She shook her head slowly. "No, you gave up that right." He studied her face with unnerving patience. "I gave up control, not truth." Silence stretched. The street noise felt intrusive now. Too loud, too ordinary for something so fragile unraveling between them. Her son shifted in the back seat, humming softly to himself, blissfully unaware of the gravity pressing down on the adults outside. He glanced toward the sound just for a moment. His jaw tightened. When his gaze returned to her, it was more restrained than before. More dangerous. "How old is he?" he asked. The question landed like a blade laid gently on skin. She laughed once, weak and broken. "You don't get to do this." "I do," he said quietly. "And so do you. Not later. Not someday. Now." Her chest burned. I was protecting him. His brow furrowed, not in disbelief, but understanding. "From me? From your world?" "That's not what I asked." She looked away first. He waited. The restraint it took nearly splintered him. He could feel it, muscle memory screaming to close distance, to assert, to claim what fate had placed in front of him. But he kept still because the way she held herself told him everything. This wasn't manipulation. This was survival. Finally, she spoke, voice barely steady. "You didn't disappear. You stayed exactly where you were. Powerful. Untouchable. Men like you don't just fade into the background. And yet," he said evenly, "you did." "Yes," she shot back. "Because I knew how to be small. Because I knew how to vanish. Because someone had to choose safety over pride." The child laughed again at something on the radio. That sound gutted him. He lowered his voice. "Answer me this, and I'll stop. I won't ask again. I won't follow you home. I won't show up tomorrow." She dared to look at him. "Is he mine?" The question wasn't sharp. It wasn't loud. It was devastating in its simplicity. Her lips parted. Her eyes filled. She closed them as if bracing against a blow that never came. Every instinct told her to deny it, to protect the fragile world she'd built with silence and sleepless nights and love poured into one small boy. But something about his restraint, about the fact that he had not demanded, not threatened, not claimed, broke her open. She nodded once, barely perceptible, but it was enough. He inhaled slowly, deeply, as if he had been holding his breath for years without realizing it. "Thank you," he said. She stared at him, disbelieving. "That's it?" "No," he replied, eyes never leaving her face. "That's the beginning." Then, softer, anchored by something new and dangerous. "And this time, I won't pretend distance is protection." The first warning didn't come from him. It came in the form of a broken lock. She noticed it when she returned home that evening, her son heavy with sleep on her shoulder, his arms slack around her neck. The hallway light flickered like it always did, and for one foolish second she told herself it was nothing. Old building, careless neighbor, a key turned too hard. Then she saw the scrape along the doorframe. Fresh. Angry. Her pulse spiked. She didn't open the door. She shifted her son's weight carefully, stepped back without making a sound, and turned, slowly, heart pounding so hard, it felt like it might bruise her from the inside. That was when her phone vibrated in her hand. Unknown number. She answered without speaking. "Don't go inside," his voice said. Calm, certain. Already there ahead of her fear. Her breath shuddered. "How? I told you," he cut in gently. "Distance isn't protection." She looked up and down the empty hallway, every shadow suddenly sharp. "You're watching me?" "No," he said immediately. "But someone else is." Her knees went weak. "Who?" A pause, just long enough to be honest. "Men who remember me, men who remember you." Cold settled into her bones. She hadn't spoken his name in years, hadn't gone near his world, had lived small and quiet, and careful. All that restraint, every sacrifice, had been meant to keep this exact moment from happening. "I didn't tell anyone," she whispered. "I swear." "I believe you." That frightened her more than doubt would have. Then how did they— They saw us, he said. What happened today wasn't subtle, and there are people who make a living noticing cracks. Her son stirred against her shoulder, murmuring nonsense words. She swallowed hard and tightened her hold. I thought if I stayed gone long enough. Her voice broke. If I raised him quietly. You bought time, he said evenly. Not safety. She closed her eyes. The truth settled heavy and undeniable. Silence hadn't erased the danger. It had just delayed it, allowed it to mature, to sharpen. I have men on the way, he continued. Not to surround you, not to frighten him, just to secure the building while we talk. We? She echoed. Yes. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the hallway, measured, controlled, not rushing. She stiffened. Look at me, he said softly through the phone, though he wasn't there. You did nothing wrong. This isn't punishment for leaving. This is consequence catching up. The footsteps passed without stopping. A man glanced at her, subtle and respectful, giving nothing away to anyone who might be watching. Then another. Then another. Silent guards. Her chest felt tight. This is exactly what I was afraid of. And still, he replied, you survived without me. You protected him alone. Don't confuse that with failure. Her voice cracked. Then why does it feel like I led the danger straight to us? Because you're a mother, he said. And fear convinces good people that omnipotence is a requirement. It isn't. The apartment door across the hall opened briefly, then closed again. Curious eyes. Ordinary life brushing dangerously close to hers. I won't let them use you to get to me, he said, and I won't let them use him at all. A tear slipped free despite her effort to stop it. You can't undo what's already started. No, he agreed quietly, but I can end it. She leaned her forehead against the cool wall, exhaustion flooding her limbs. What does that mean? It means the men who thought you were leverage made a mistake. And the ones who haven't acted yet? They will, he said. Soon. Her pulse hammered. So this is it. The life I ran from. No, he corrected. This is the moment you stop running. She said nothing. Down the hallway, the building felt smaller. Less safe. The illusion she'd built cracking under the weight of reality. I need you to trust me, he said, softer now. Not forever. Just tonight. She closed her eyes, feeling the truth settle. Sharp, terrifying, unavoidable. Her silence hadn't saved them. It had only postponed the reckoning. All right, she whispered. He had promised himself he wouldn't intervene. That was the lie he had lived with for years. The cleanest one, the most necessary. Distance as mercy. Absence as armor. He had let her disappear into a quieter world, because loving her had meant endangering her, and loving her child, before he even knew the truth, had meant respecting the life she chose without him. Until now. He stood at the edge of the safe house balcony long before dawn, the city still dark beneath him, lights scattered like distant embers. Below, 2 cars idled. One at the corner, one across the street. His men, quiet, invisible. Exactly how he liked them. Inside, through the glass, he could see her silhouette move. She hadn't slept. Neither had he. He'd replayed the sound of her voice in the hallway over and over, the fear she'd tried to swallow, the guilt she'd tried to claim. She'd carried it alone for too long. Worse, she still believed she was the problem, that loving him had somehow invited violence into her life. It hadn't. Violence had already existed. His absence hadn't erased it. It had only taught her to shoulder it alone. His phone buzzed once. All clear, Marco reported quietly. No movement on the perimeter. Good, he said. Rotate the outer watch at sunrise. I don't want patterns. Yes, boss. He ended the call and stayed where he was, one hand resting on the cold railing, jaw tight. He'd been taught early that promises mattered only if you were willing to suffer for them. He had suffered. For years. Every instinct in him had screamed to find her, to make sure she was breathing, safe, untouched by the darkness of his world. And still, he had stayed away. Because he had loved her more than he loved himself. That changed the moment the door to her apartment had been touched by someone who thought she was unguarded. That changed the moment he realized silence had not spared them. That changed the moment he understood that letting go had not removed fate's interest. It had only delayed its reach. Behind him, the balcony door slid open softly. She stepped out, wrapped in one of his spare sweaters, hair loose, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She didn't speak at first, just joined him, resting her forearms against the railing, following his gaze into the dark city. You haven't slept, she said quietly. Neither have you. She exhaled slowly. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. It won't, he said. Not tonight. And tomorrow? He turned then, fully studying her face, the strength there, the fear beneath it, the stubborn resolve that had always undone him. Tomorrow, I stop pretending distance still works. Her breath caught. You said, years ago, you said you'd let me go. I did. And now? She asked, not accusing, just searching. Now I choose differently. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. You don't owe us this, she said finally. You already protected us tonight. You could step back again. I'd find another way. He shook his head. That's the illusion I bought into once. That safety could exist without power. His voice lowered. It can't. Not in this world. She wrapped her arms around herself. And if staying means they come harder. Then they learn, he replied calmly. What a mistake that was. She looked at him then, not with fear, not with awe, but with something dangerously close to hope. You're talking like this is permanent. I am. Her throat bobbed. And the promise? He took a breath. This was the line he hadn't crossed. The one he'd sworn not to. I promised to let you go so fate wouldn't take you from me, he said, but fate doesn't get to collect twice. A tear slipped free. She brushed it away roughly, embarrassed. You're sure? No, he admitted, but I'm done letting fear decide for us. Inside, a small sound drifted through the open door, a child shifting in sleep, a soft murmur, a heartbeat unaware of how close danger had come. Her gaze followed his instinctively, and in that quiet, fragile moment, the last barrier broke. I'm not walking away again, he said. Not from you, not from him, not from what should have been mine to protect all along. She nodded slowly, as if accepting something she'd known was inevitable the moment the black car had appeared. Then stay, she whispered. He placed his hand over hers on the railing, firm, certain. I never planned to leave. Morning light filtered into the safe house in narrow bands, pale and cold, cutting across stone floors and heavy furnishings built for permanence, not comfort. She woke before the sun fully cleared the horizon, the unfamiliar stillness pressing in around her. No sirens, no shouting neighbors, no doors slamming somewhere down a cracked hallway. Just quiet. For a moment, panic flared, disorientation sharp enough to steal her breath. Then memory returned. The broken lock, the call, the car. Him. Her son slept curled beside her on the wide bed, fingers clutching fabric as if even in dreams he sensed change. She reached out and smoothed his hair, grounding herself in the warmth of him. From the other side of the room came the faint scrape of a chair. He sat at the desk, jacket draped over the back, sleeves rolled up, shirt creased from a night spent awake. A mug steamed beside him, untouched. His attention was on a tablet angled just enough that she could see lines of text scrolling, information she knew better than to ask about. He hadn't slept. He felt her stir before she spoke. He always had that awareness, like a switch never turned off. "Morning," he said quietly, voice low and steady. She pushed herself up, careful not to wake the child. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough," he replied. No apology, no pride, just fact. She studied him from the bed. This man the world described in hard lines and darker rumors. The one she'd run from because the safety he offered came wrapped in danger. In daylight, stripped of distance and myth, he looked human, tired, guarded, still. "You didn't have to stay in here," she said. "You could have slept somewhere else." "I know." "Then why didn't you?" His fingers stilled on the screen. He glanced at the bed, at the small rise and fall of the child's chest. His expression tightened, not with fear, but with restraint. "Because distance is what created this mess," he said, "and I'm done repeating mistakes." She rose quietly, pulling on a robe, moving toward the window. Outside, security existed in layers she could feel, but not see. No obvious guards, no looming presence. Safety disguised as normalcy. "They're still watching the perimeter?" she asked. "Yes." "And inside?" she added, meaning himself. "Always." She turned back to him. "You don't turn it off." "No." "Does it ever hurt?" she asked softly. "Being like that all the time?" For the first time since she'd known him again, he hesitated. "My father taught me vigilance as survival," he said finally. "Peace was a luxury we weren't allowed." She leaned against the window frame. "And you?" He met her gaze evenly. "I learned what happens when you relax." She understood without asking how. The room settled into a fragile rhythm as the morning wore on. A staff member brought breakfast without fanfare. Simple, warm, thoughtful. He insisted on checking every plate before it came near the child. His motions precise, impersonal. Protective, without spectacle. She watched him kneel to adjust the chair for her son. Voice gentle, movements careful. No touching he hadn't been invited into. No assuming. Just quiet presence. "Does he know?" she asked later, when the child was distracted with food. "That he's mine?" His mouth curved faintly. "Not yet." "And when he does?" "When he asks," he said. "I won't lie." That mattered more than she expected. As the day unfolded, she noticed the fractures beneath his composure. The way he positioned himself between open doors and windows without thinking. The pause before he laughed. The bruises on his knuckles he hadn't acknowledged. Damage, carefully contained. Devotion, unyielding. When evening crept in, casting long shadows across the house, she realized something unsettling. She felt safe. Not because danger was gone, but because he was there. Solid. Watchful. Unmovable. She joined him on the terrace as dusk fell. "I never wanted to live under anyone's shadow," she said quietly. He didn't deny it. "I know." "And yet," she exhaled, steadying herself, "here I am." He looked at her then. Really looked. "My shadow isn't meant to eclipse you," he said. "It's meant to block what tries to reach you." Her chest tightened. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. For the first time, being close to him didn't feel like surrender. It felt like shelter. The first laugh caught him off guard. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a soft burst of sound that escaped the child's throat when he did it accidentally, when a spoon slipped and clattered against the table in a way that wasn't supposed to be funny. But it was. The sound landed in his chest like a blow. He froze halfway to standing, instinctively scanning for danger before his mind caught up with his body. Nothing was wrong. No raised voices. No sudden movement from the perimeter. Just sunlight spilling through the windows and a small boy grinning at him like he'd been waiting for that moment all day. "I did that," the child announced proudly. He nodded once. "I noticed." Another laugh. Freer this time. She watched from across the room, pretending not to see the way his shoulders eased by a fraction, the way something tight behind his eyes softened. She'd expected hesitation, distance, awkwardness. She hadn't expected this. They found each other in the quiet spaces of the day, between meals, during walks around the enclosed garden, sitting on the floor with wooden blocks that the child insisted be arranged just so. He didn't crowd, didn't command. He followed the boy's lead with an instinct that startled her, letting small hands tug him into games, accepting rules that changed without warning, answering questions with seriousness that bordered on reverence. "Why are you always watching?" the child asked at one point, climbing onto the couch beside him. "So I know when you're safe," he replied without hesitation. The boy considered this. "You're good at it." Something flickered across his face at that. Pride, sharp and unfamiliar. "Thank you," he said quietly. Later, when the child grew tired and restless, he carried him without being asked, supportive, careful, one arm instinctively braced to shield. The boy didn't resist, just rested his head against his chest as if it belonged there. She turned away so he wouldn't see her cry. Night brought routine, bath, pajamas. A story read in a low voice not accustomed to bedtime cadence, but determined to get it right. The child corrected him without mercy when he skipped pages. "No," the boy said firmly. "That part matters." He smiled, really smiled at that. "So does this one," he said, and read it again. When sleep finally came, deep and trusting, he sat longer than necessary at the bedside, one large hand resting lightly on the blanket, as if daring fate to test him now. She found him there an hour later. "You don't have to stay," she whispered. "I know." "You keep saying that, and you keep thinking I'll leave," he replied gently. She leaned against the doorframe. "I don't know how to watch this and not be afraid." "Of what?" "That you'll love him," she said, "and that the world will use it against you." He stood slowly, carefully, as if any abrupt movement might fracture what had formed. He faced her then, eyes dark but steady. "I already love him," he said. No hesitation, no dramatics, just truth. Her breath caught. "I didn't think I'd get this," he continued. "Not ever. I thought some doors close so fully they don't even leave a draft behind." He glanced back at the sleeping child. "But he feels like—" He searched for the word, unguarded for once. "Like home." The word echoed in the quiet room. She nodded, wiping at her face. "He's never had that." Then he will now. In the days that followed, she saw the change deepen. Meals planned around small preferences. Security schedules adjusted so the child never felt watched. His voice softened without losing command. His world, rigid and ruthless, bent around this small orbit without breaking. And he let it. She realized then that the most dangerous thing about this man wasn't his power. It was that once he claimed something as his, he protected it with his entire being. The child had done what no threat ever could. He had changed everything. The shift came without spectacle. No explosions, no shouting men at the gate, no headlines screaming his name, just silence where there should have been noise. He felt it first. The safe house woke as it always did. Guards rotating, systems humming, routines intact. But something underneath it all was wrong. Too quiet, too clean, like a board wiped before a move. He stood in the security room, hands braced on the table, eyes scanning feeds that showed nothing but normalcy. The kind of normal that made men like him uneasy. "They've gone dark," Marco said carefully. 3 contacts, 2 financiers, 1 courier line, all cut in the last 12 hours. "By accident?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No." He exhaled through his nose, controlled. "Who knows?" Marco hesitated. "Ferraro's people, the old families, and—" He paused. "Word is moving." She felt it when he didn't come to breakfast. The child was halfway through a story when she noticed his chair untouched. A small thing, but absence had taught her to listen to details. "He busy?" the boy asked, swinging his legs. "Yes," she said softly. "But he'll come see you later." She hoped it was true. By midday, the first confirmation arrived, not as an attack, but as intelligence, a photograph. Grainy, taken from across the street weeks ago. Her hand holding the child's, his face just clear enough. Eyes unmistakable. Blood unmistakable. He stared at the image in silence when it was brought to him. No reaction, no break in composure, just understanding. Enemies didn't forgive legacy. They tolerated men. They bargained with power. They waited out tyrants. But bloodlines? Heirs? Those were wars waiting to happen. "They're circulating it," Marco said, quietly, letting it settle, seeing who reacts. And who already knew. Everyone who matters. His jaw tightened. They weren't coming for him yet. They were circling, testing, considering the value of a child who wasn't supposed to exist. When he entered the living room that evening, the boy ran straight to him, arms flung wide without hesitation. Trust incarnate. A declaration no enemy ever could. He caught him easily, lifting him, pressing his forehead briefly to the child's temple. She watched from the doorway, heart thudding. "You're late," she said gently. "I know." "You feel it, don't you?" she asked. "Yes." He set the boy down with care. "Go finish your puzzle," he said. "I'll be right here." The child obeyed, secure enough not to look back. Once they were alone, she stepped closer. "What's happening?" "They know," he said simply. Her breath caught. "Who?" "All of them." She didn't ask how. Didn't ask when. She already felt the answer clawing up her spine. "And now?" she whispered. "Now the game changes." He turned to her fully then, no shadows in his expression, no softening. This was the man his enemies feared. Focused, ruthless, awake. "They won't strike immediately," he continued. "They'll posture, leverage information, try to force my hand." "With him," she said. "With him," he confirmed, "because blood makes men sloppy, and they expect me to be." She swallowed. "Are they right?" He reached for her hands, grounding. "No, they underestimate what I will do to keep him untouched." A sound echoed faintly, a distant car, a gate closing. "From this moment on," he said quietly, "we assume this is no longer about business." She nodded. "It's about lineage." "And what lineage represents," he added. "Continuity, power beyond death, fear that doesn't age out." The child laughed suddenly across the room, oblivious, proud of fitting a final piece into place. He looked at the boy, something fierce and protective blazing behind his eyes. "They wanted a war," he said. "They just crowned a reason." She squeezed his hands. "I never wanted him to be part of this." "He isn't," he replied. "Not as a weapon, not as leverage." "Then what is he?" He answered without hesitation. "He's the line they will never cross." Outside, unseen, the board finished resetting, and the world leaned toward violence because enemies never forgave legacy. They tried to erase it. Night pressed in thick and soundless around the safe house, the kind of quiet that didn't soothe but sharpened every thought. She sat awake long after the lights dimmed, the child asleep down the hall under a watchful camera, and two men she hadn't seen but knew were there. She could feel them, layers of protection she'd never asked for, never wanted, and now couldn't imagine tearing away without blood. Love had never scared her like this. Fear, she understood. She had lived with it for years, learned how to fold herself around it, how to make herself smaller so it wouldn't notice her. But love was different. Love made promises. Love invited loss in ways fear never could. She stood and moved quietly through the house, bare feet on cool stone, the air smelling faintly of metal and cedar. She found him where she expected. Awake, seated at the long table, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, attention split between screens and the space beyond them. He looked up the moment she entered, awareness immediate. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." He didn't argue. Just watched as she came closer, stopping on the opposite side of the table as if an invisible line still separated them. Distance out of habit. Distance out of caution. "They won't stop," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "No," he replied. "They won't." Her chest tightened. "And staying with you means this never really ends." "It changes," he said. "But no, it doesn't end." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I spent years teaching myself that survival meant independence, that needing someone was a weakness I couldn't afford." "And now?" he asked. "Now I don't know if trusting you is braver than walking away." He leaned back slightly, giving her room, letting the moment breathe. "Walking away would be simpler." "Yes," she agreed, "cleaner." "But not safer," he finished. She looked at him sharply. "You can't promise that." "No," he said honestly. "I can promise that walking alone won't be safer either." Silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. Neither tried to soften. Outside, wind brushed against reinforced glass, a reminder of the world waiting beyond their shelter. "I watched him sleep tonight," she said suddenly. "He doesn't know any of this is happening. He still believes the world works if you're good and careful." His gaze softened. "So did I. Once." "What happens to him if I choose wrong?" she whispered. He stood then, slowly, deliberately until the table no longer separated them. He stopped just short of touching her. "If you choose wrong," he said, voice low, "I will still protect him. That doesn't change." "And me?" "That depends," he admitted, "on whether you let yourself be protected." Her breath shook. "That sounds like surrender." "It isn't," he replied. "It's partnership. I don't want control over you. I want you with me, eyes open. Equal in truth, if not in muscle." She closed her eyes, fighting the urge to step closer. "What if I trust you and everything I'm afraid of comes true?" "Then we face it together," he said simply. "I can fight wars. I can dismantle threats. But I can't do any of it if the people I'm protecting keep leaving holes behind them." She laughed weakly. "You make it sound so reasonable." "It isn't," he said. "Love never is." Her eyes snapped to his. "You don't get to say that like it's casual." "I'm not being casual," he replied. "I'm being precise." Her throat closed. "Loving you puts a target on us." "Yes." "And not loving you?" "Doesn't remove it," he said quietly. "It just means you face it without the one man they're actually afraid of." She thought of nights alone, of doors checked twice, of telling herself she was strong because she had no alternative. Thought of her child's laughter echoing off stone walls built to withstand sieges. Thought of the man in front of her, damaged, relentless, offering shelter not as a cage, but as a shield. "What if I stay?" she asked, voice barely more than air. "And one day, I regret it." He didn't hesitate. "Then I'll let you go." The words landed heavy, familiar, promises echoed and reshaped. "And until then?" she asked. "Until then," he said, stepping closer at last, "I will be the risk you choose." Love surged sharp and terrifying in her chest, not gentle, not safe, but real. She nodded slowly. For the first time, she didn't step back, and the world shifted, not because danger vanished, but because she stopped facing it alone. Morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself were holding its breath. She woke to warmth at her back, not the weight of a hand or an arm, but presence, solid, awake. There when she opened her eyes, instead of gone like so many mornings before. For a split second instinct flared, the old reflex to prepare for abandonment. Then she heard him exhale, slow, controlled, real. Down the hall a small voice drifted through the house, sleepy, curious, safe. "Mom?" She smiled before she could stop herself. "I'm here," she called softly, movement beside her. He rose immediately, already dressed, already alert. But there was something else there now, too. Not tension, not distance. Decision. "I've got him," he said, low and certain, already heading for the door. She watched him go, heart twisting. Not with fear this time, but with awe. He didn't disappear. He didn't hesitate. He knelt to the child's level, spoke quietly, listened carefully. He stayed through breakfast, through the slow unfurling of the morning, through questions about puzzles and birds, and why mountains had snow even when the sun was out. When a call came, urgent, coded, dangerous, he answered it without leaving the room, without turning his back. "I'm aware," he said evenly. "No, that changes nothing." He ended the call and met her eyes across the table. "They'll keep testing," she said. "Yes. And you?" "I'll keep answering," he replied. "From here." That was the proof. Not promises spoken in the dark. Not vows wrapped in poetry. But presence, unmoving, inconvenient, chosen. Night out! Later that day they stood together at the edge of the property, the child between them, bundled in a jacket much too big, pointing excitedly at a hawk circling above the tree line. "He says it's watching us," the boy announced. He crouched beside him, shading his eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just making sure nothing touches what's already claimed." The boy nodded solemnly, satisfied with that answer. She felt it then, the sharp, undeniable click of something long broken settling back into place. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't borrowed safety. This was alignment. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from the past. A door cracking open, offering an exit she could still take if she wanted. He didn't look at the screen. Didn't ask. Didn't tighten his jaw. He trusted her. She slipped the phone back without responding. That night, the storm finally came. Rain hammered the glass. Wind clawed at stone and steel. Power flickered once, then held. The safe house stood firm, not just because of reinforced walls, but because of what stood inside them. When she woke from a half-remembered dream, he was still there, sitting up, watching the door, watching the world. "You don't have to guard everything," she murmured. "I know," he said. "I choose to." She reached for his hand this time, anchored him as much as he anchored her. "This doesn't end cleanly," she said. "No. And we don't know how this story finishes." "True." She met his eyes. "Then why stay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down the hall, toward the small room where a child slept unafraid, then back to her. "Because some things are worth being seen for," he said. "Worth being targeted for. Worth standing still for when everything else tells you to run." Fate had tried to erase them. Silence, distance, blood, fear. It had failed. When morning came again, they stood together at the window, not hiding, not fleeing. A family, not declared, not labeled, but undeniable. And this time, he stayed.